Welcome to Orbicle Times Podcast, and hello to everyone, whatever part of the globe you're from or happen to reside in. My name is Kelly Jo, and here we'll provide armchair conversations gathered from interviews and research reviews to explore the seen, the unseen, and the in-between of the supernatural paranormal phenomena, with topics that circle around spirit orbs, NDEs, OBEs, UFOs, time slips, mystical moments, higher consciousness, and more. I hope that this cast will be our meeting place and judge-free zone where we can explore, learn, and grow through the telling of. This cast will be launched on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly schedule whenever I'm able to make contact with those in the know for their telling of. Speaking of those in the know and the telling of, have you had mystical moments or other supernatural paranormal experiences? Care to share on this cast? Then consider stepping into the light with your telling of, or send in your monologue for me to read on this podcast. Simply email orbicletimespodcast@gmail.com for a chance to contribute to this cast.
And don't be afraid of death. Death is beautiful. It's not connected to pain or fear as we think it is. It's a transition that we all will have to make at the end of the day. I, for one, am not afraid to die.
Go back to your home.
Yes, to that orb.
In this episode of Orbicle Times, Willa Louw from South Africa joins us for the telling of her 2007 near-death experience, which circles around her transformation into an orb while receiving medical intervention with the timely assistance of an unknown stranger that she identifies as a possible angel, plus her abilities to bring messages from spirit for their loved ones. Willa, thank you so much for setting aside some time for this chat, and welcome to this cast.
Thank you, Kelly Jo, for hosting me, and it's such a wonderful time to have been chatting to you.
So Willa, if you'd like to begin your telling of what happened that Tuesday in 2007, just prior to your NDE, continue from there.
Kelly, perfect. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
So it was back in 2007 in March. On the Tuesday evening, it was my senior year of high school, and I was lying in bed and wondering what excuse I can use not to go to school the Wednesday to catch up on my study work. And around about the Wednesday morning, around about 2, I started having abdominal pain. And the pain progressed and progressed. And I was like, you know what? This is not the type of idea I had in mind when I wanted to stay at home. I wanted to study, not stay in bed, actually. And around about 4:30 in the morning, my parents back then was active cyclists. And I went through to them and told them, listen, I've got severe pain. Something isn't right. And my stepmom gave me 2 painkillers just to take. She thought maybe it's just a stress or some type of gas that's stuck in between, nothing too serious. And an hour later, I couldn't walk anymore, and I crawled to my sister's room for her to take me to go to the loo. And so eventually I had to go to the doctor, and everyone was like, just remember, it's nothing serious, nothing to be concerned of. And as I went into the doctor's offices, they did immediately some urine tests, some CT scans, sonars, and couldn't find anything wrong except for my urine that showed a high infection. So the urine showed a high count of infection. And the doctor said, well, something isn't right, but I don't know what it is. So unfortunately, you have to go to hospital. So my one day at home studying ended up to being a few days or weeks into hospital. So as I was being submitted into hospital, they ordered more tests, more blood tests. And the blood test came back also with severe infection, although the doctors couldn't pinpoint what it is causing the infection, as all the organs are functioning. However, they are a bit swollen. As the infection progressed, I started to swelling, I started turning yellow, and the following day, Thursday, the doctors ordered more tests, and they asked the specialist to come in to see me. And the specialist only came the Friday morning. And as he came, he had two looks at me and he's like, you need to go onto the operation room now. No questions about it. Back then, load shedding was still a new concept, so I had to be transferred from one hospital to another. And as I came to the new hospital, the bed was already for me at reception, and I jumped onto it. They literally rushed with me to another room. The sisters was trying to get me dressed. The doctor said, just get her onto the room. There's no time for this. And they rushed me into the operation room, and the doctor started putting me down under the sleeping mat. It was about 15 minutes, and all of a sudden I opened my eyes and I was in this white, wonderful orb.
Did your heart stop beating? Could you see a monitor?
Yes, my monitor was there. However, I'm not sure if I flatlined or not. That wasn't brought to my attention. It didn't caught my attention. And so, as I was in this white light, I was going in and out between experiencing what's going on the operating table, but I was more intrigued with this super orb plasma of energy, that complete calmness that I felt, the unconditional love. It's to be scared to death prior an operation, and you don't know what's wrong, in your mind with all the different questions, and to be back into this don't care, you're just overwhelmed with this unconditional love. Nothing can be of concern to you. Basically, you've lost interest in your human body, if I can say it like that. So I was basically going in between from this orb to viewing the operating table, and I could see the doctor is like really stressing. But the most intriguing part about the human experience, if I can say it like that, while I was there in the orb, I could hear feelings and feel emotions. I could understand what they are saying in their mind, what they are thinking. It's like an open canal. You can't hide anything. Whatever the doctor was thinking, and I could see this shouldn't be, and he's running through scenarios in his head. And the sisters and everyone is picking up on their stress, and to feel a sound and to experience a emotion from someone else in your mind, it is completely amazing the way the communication happens. And I was in and out between this orb, and all of a sudden a doctor entered the operating theater, and the entire room went dead silence. And every sister was looking at this doctor. Even their thoughts that were raising of stress and panic went completely dead. The machines went quiet. You couldn't hear anything. I think if they dropped a needle, you could have heard that. And this doctor told the surgeon, listen, yeah, you need to do this and this and this, and leave that. Don't remove that. She's going to need that. Her body will have to use that to recover in full. And as he was giving him this medical procedures on what to do, what not to do, you could actually see how the doctor is playing that in his mind. And he's like, oh, yes, this can work. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, let me do it that. And the doctor left. And everyone in the operation room was like, that just happened, that we just witnessed a random doctor coming in, giving advice and walking out. And so basically they all went back, and I went back into the orb. By this time, I knew that my appendix had torn and that the fluid was poisoning my body for more than probably 3 days at that stage. So the fact that I recovered from it is a miracle on its own. And I was like, oh, so it was just my appendix, I didn't have that in my mind. And I went back into the light, and just with this complete awe of unconditional love, of, peace, and not concerned about this body on the table, not bothered by this emergency situation below me. So eventually, about 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 45 minutes probably, after the procedure, they removed me from the table and put me onto the bed to roll me out to my room.
Did you see that happening?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
By that time, the orb basically disappeared and I was floating on top of my body. I was lying like someone on the beach with the arms crossed behind the head, enjoying this moment. And I can remember I was thinking, I can't wait to tell the doctor that it was my appendix, you know. I was so relieved to know what was actually wrong with me by that time that I didn't actually pay attention with the outcome of it. And as they pushed me into the room, it was a room of 6 beds. And they placed me in a isolation setup as anything could happen at any time due to my organs being in such a fragile state due to the infection. And as I put the bed down basically and put the brakes on, that moment, that joking moment, my spirit probably went into my body and I opened my eyes and I told the doctor it was my appendix. And he was like shocked and he's like, how did you know? Did you have another doctor on your case? I'm like, no, doctor, I was rushed into this hospital. Where must I have had the time to seek a second opinion? But I saw the doctor and he's like,
funny.
You did what? I was like, yes, the doctor that came in and told you what to do. And he's like, were you awake? And I'm like, no. And he's like, did you feel anything? And I'm like, no. And he rushed out, probably doing his daily surgeries for the day. And around about 12-ish in the afternoon, he came back and asked me again, are you serious? You didn't have a second opinion. You didn't consult another doctor. I'm like, no, doctor. I was rushed from one hospital to your hospital. I wasn't even dressed. Where should I have had the time to get a second opinion?
Right.
And he's like, okay, we're going to ask the security for footage because if anyone can enter an operating room, it's very dangerous and very risky.
Right.
And I remember back then the sisters coming in and in. It's like, oh, you're the girl with the mystical doctor. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, okay. You like, no, tell me. So the doctor requested the CCTV footage of the operating room. And it showed as everyone was around me on the table, everyone was looking to the doors. So everyone noticed that there was a person entering the room, but that person wasn't caught on the video.
Did you see the video?
No, unfortunately, they didn't want me to see it.
Okay.
Due to security, but I'm sure it must be somewhere. Someone must have a recording of it.
Absolutely.
And all the sisters came to me whenever, and they're like, oh, so you're the girl with the angel. What did you experience? And they kept it like a hush-hush environment back then, because in South Africa, things like this are very frowned upon. Luckily, it's more open now with a more movement of freedom. But as my uncle was sitting next to me when I just came out of the theater, he's like, you don't talk about this to anyone. They're going to lock you up, And so, while I was there in the hospital for the 2 weeks after my procedure, the sisters and doctors came and asked me about, how did I know about this doctor? Did I see how he looked? Trying to fish him out. But unfortunately, he had his mask on, his scrubs. You couldn't see anything except for his eyes. Ironically enough, after my NDE experience, since I left the hospital, it was like placed in a box. And only in the last year, that spiritual box of mine was really opened, and everything that I've experienced prior to my big NDE, which I can remember, made sense.
What was the catalyst that opened up that box?
I think it was a friend from America, believe it or not, he's like, Villa, you had an NDE. And I was like shocked, like, how do you know, And he's like, it's time for you to tell your story. And that's when I was like, okay, maybe it's time. And as I put it out, talking more about it, the more my past also seemed to fit into place. Like, for example, I drowned twice when I was a little girl, probably 1, 2 years, but I couldn't remember any experience of that. But I do remember having paranormal experiences. I always saw death in a white light. And growing up, death is a morbid thing. You associate death with black, like the Grim Reaper is black. And normally I will see someone, and if they have this white light following them, I know within a week they will no longer be on this earth. And after I've experienced this white light, I've immediately associated it's death, and it's not to be afraid of. It's more to be embracing it. It's not as morbid as we as humans make it.
Okay, well, let's explore that. But first, I just want to thank you for telling that fantastic story about your NDE. And we will circle back to the light and also the spirits that come to visit you, except now that we are able to communicate this way so far, cross our fingers, I have a few questions about your NDE. So first of all, the initial hospital that you were in, or the clinic, did it have X-ray equipment?
Yes, it did. It was a fully functional hospital, but it's more like a day hospital.
I want to talk to you about the orb that you were in, or get clarity about that orb. So while you were in the operating room and you were unconscious, you described that you went out of your body, you found yourself in a white orb, or were you part of that orb or part of the white light? Could you clarify for that? Because you probably, the sound quality here on my end was not that great.
Perfect. So to say it like that, the white orb was there. I was basically returning and becoming part of it, but it was bigger than what I am. That's why my assumption is I believe it must be God.
Did it have an energy to it?
The energy that I felt was like really calm, lovable, fast pace. But that's about it. It was like anything was possible within that realm.
Was there dimension to it? Like, could you guesstimate, if you will, how big you were as an orb?
What I grasped afterwards, after thinking about it, my body was basically the size of my body, and the orb was that of an Olympian swimming pool. It was huge, but the size didn't affect me. It was, I'm part of this swimming pool.
So you're part of the white light?
Yes, I returned to that.
Do you recall looking for your body parts of your, what I'll say is your sort of higher conscious self while you were in this light? Or did you just intrinsically know that you consisted only of the light or the consciousness?
How can I say it? When I was in this orb, I knew that I didn't have the need for any human to say like that. I was floating there, but I could see. If it was with physical eyes, I'm not sure, but I could see as well. I can see my hand in front of me. The only difference is where I knew I didn't have a body as such is if you look around, you can see your cheekbones, for example, or you can see your nose. I didn't have that. But if I wanted to stretch out my arm, an arm was created. It like instantly there if I needed it.
So you could materialize appendages?
Like that, yes.
Wow.
But there was no need for it.
Would you say that the light had an intelligence to it?
Yes. I would say the light was the source of beginning and the end of everything.
Did you recognize it when you were part of inside of this orb?
I didn't recognize it as what I could identify you, but it felt home. It felt like I am where I need to be. It felt like I'm connected to this.
It almost sounds like that you had also the ability to either sort of tune in or tune out as to what was happening in the operating room, but you preferred to focus, I'm guessing,
Yes.
on that white light. Can you speculate as to why sometimes you were focused over there and then focused on the white light? Do you have any ideas as to why that would have happened?
I think the reason for that was to verify what was actually happening. I think if the medical team just witnessed it, it would have been just their story. They would have written it off for a weird occurrence, a freak
Exactly.
incident.
Yeah.
But the fact that I, as a patient, could tell them what actually happened from a bird's point of view, that really confronted the reality of this entire situation. They needed to be present to experience this.
I know that you could hear sounds while you were in the orb. Were there any aromas?
No, it was only like a mental telepathy that I could hear, but everything was in your brain. It's like you take your ears and eyes away, and everything is communicated via one thread. But I didn't smell anything. I have no sense of smelling.
Okay. Now, when you were in that theater, were you floating then above your body, or were you somewhere else within the room?
I was more to the left side on top of my body, probably about 2-3 meters floating on top of it.
All this information leads me to ask you, where do you think consciousness resides?
I think consciousness is part of our spirit body, in all honesty. Since this experience, it makes me believe that the spirit is an energy that is tied to consciousness. And whenever you look back to something, it's always due to an influencer from an outside. This saying basically that your consciousness, your memory, everything that has to do with emotion is connected, and that eventually will leave and go back.
That's interesting perspective. Do you think that your consciousness has expanded since your NDE?
After my NDE, I'm going to say the spiritual awakening increased significantly for me. I see things differently. I view things differently. For example, one thing for me that extremely changed after my NDE is I was a Christian prior to my NDE, and after my spiritual awakening, I would prefer to saying like I'm a child of God, as Christianity is bound by religion.
Right.
And after what I've experienced, religion is man-made, incorporated in our daily lives to control the human masses in a way due to fear and so forth. And everything that I've experienced is nothing to do with that. So it made me wonder, but if I was taught this, then why did I experience this?
Had you had those thoughts soon after your experience, or has this manifested over the years?
It manifested over the years. It was something, it's like riding a bicycle. You can't just jump onto a bicycle and ride it. You need to learn. But let's say you get in an accident and you need to relearn to use a bicycle. That's the same that I would describe it to. It's like going to physio. It's like to rebuild the muscles, to relearn.
When you were a part of that, like, were you aware of time? Time as we know it.
Yes and no. While the doctor was operating, the time was passing. I noticed that. But whenever I was in the orb, time did not exist.
When you remember about being part of the light, and then you being drawn over to what was happening to you on the table, did you feel like you literally came out of that light? Or were you still engulfed in it, if you will?
I'm probably going to use a weird example.
No, go for it.
But it's like that sucking kids' toys that you do get when they squirt water and they pull it back up. It was like that.
Okay. Like you would use when you're trying to get gravy out of the bottom of the turkey pan?
Exactly like that, yes.
Okay. That white light, did it wrap itself around you like a blanket, or was it more like a balloon, if you will? You mentioned that there was space from where you were, or where your consciousness was. Yeah.
I would say it was like a human blood cell. It was moving. It was like plasma. It wasn't bound to a balloon shape.
Have you ever heard of the gateway experience?
No, never.
I'm not intimately familiar with it, so the listener will have to excuse me. I'm going to get some of this information wrong, but so this is from the something called the Monroe Institute, and it's a technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, and this was called or given the name the gateway experience, and this involved the brain hemisphere, the synchronization, I guess, and they called that aka hemisync. So this was developed apparently for the Army for remote viewing. There are currently, you can find them on the internet, focus tapes with meditation instructions, which include this hemisync, which consists of different sound frequencies for each ear in order to change the brain waves and ultimately change one's consciousness. Now, you're probably thinking, what is she telling me this for? Well, this is all this to say is that within this meditation, there is a point where the listener is asked to imagine that they are in an orb and that this orb will surround them, that'll protect them, and it'll keep them safe. So when I heard you say that, it reminded me of that, because I did try to go along that path, but I found the instruction a little bit hard for me to keep up with. Maybe it was the 1950 talk that there was something about the instruction, and I'm not one for instruction anyways when it comes to meditation overall, unless it's something like the body scan. So all that to say is I just wanted to know if you had ever heard of that, and maybe you want to take a peek at that information anyways. Sort of throwing that out there.
Perfect. All right. I'll have a look around it.
Okay. Now, I'm so curious about this doctor who everybody in the operating room saw, but he was wearing a mask. The security cameras didn't pick him up. I'm wondering, what did his voice sound like to your ear?
Like any other educated doctor, taking charge, speaking with confidence. I didn't see any, how can I say, abnormalities when he was speaking. It was as if we were speaking now.
And did he have an accent?
No, he was very bound to my language, which is Afrikaans, if I can say it like that.
Yes.
And nothing sounded abnormal.
Did he introduce himself to the staff?
No. He just went in to say, listen, you need to do this and this and this and this.
And nobody said, hey, who are you? What do you think you're doing in here? Get out.
No, that was the quite interesting part, because I think everyone was so stressed. At that time, I was 18 years old.
Right.
I was very young, and I think the age of the patient also infected the way the doctor was serious to save a patient,
Okay, good point.
And
Yeah.
everyone was like so focused to save this body, to save me as a patient. I think he just came in at the right moment where their minds were so occupied on how to save me that the questions only occurred afterwards, after they actually noticed of what the heck just happened.
They were in shock.
Yes.
Did he say goodbye when he left?
No, he just turned around the same way he entered, the same way he left.
Did he look in your direction? When I say your direction, I mean you up in the light.
No, he just looked directly into the doctor's eyes, gave him instructions, and turned around and left.
Did he seem familiar to you?
No.
So why do you think this happened to you? And you can take that question however you want to, whether you mean why did the doctor come in, or why were you up in an orb, or why did your appendix break? Any or all of the following.
Because I remember while I was admitted to hospital, I clearly said in my mind, this is not the idea I had in mind, to stay away from school.
Okay.
But I do believe everything happens for a reason. I know some people might debate this, so some of your listeners might find it intriguing or not. I believe we all were given a contract that we signed and agreed to when we came onto this earth. And probably this was part of my contract, but also to make things for me more understanding throughout my entire life, looking back now. Because if you have a contract, you sign for certain events that's going to happen in your life. In the NDE environment, and the people that I communicate to is people came here to experience. I'm sure you're familiar with it. We came here to experience something.
Yes.
But how can you experience something if you don't know what it is? So you need to learn it first to experience it.
When you say that we're here to learn something and we need to experience it, are you talking about experience having to go into an operation and then having yet another experience that took you down a path of, if you want to call it spiritual enlightenment, or if you had find that you had, and I put in air quotes, a download of information over the years? What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is obviously someone had to be the guinea pig for that operation at that time, in that country, in that area, and I volunteered most likely for it.
Okay.
But that volunteering also affected my life. I believe that everyone that was present in that operating room needed to experience that particular happening.
Event.
And with me doing that, I automatically completed a chapter of my contract. And that unlocked, let's say, skills because of what I've learned, and that I can apply to my life and reevaluate situations to say, oh, that's why that makes sense.
Now, you mentioned that you were lying down at one point when you got out of the operating room and into, let's say, ICU. People don't know what that is, intensive care unit. So they took you somewhere else, but they wanted to keep a close watch on you. So while you were waiting, you saw your feet crossed and your hands. I think you said it was behind your body. Is that correct? Or behind your head?
Behind my head, like lying on the beach. Yes, my feet are crossed. I could see my toes bending up and down. I could actually see my body, but it wasn't a physical body. It was like a clone see-through body of mine.
At what point did your spirit self transform from the orb of light to you becoming aware that you were still in a spirit body, but that you could see the parts? I'm going to say you almost seem like you were having then at that point, an out-of-body experience as opposed to an NDE. But that's just
correct,
me.
Yes. I agree with you on that part, because how can I say that near-death experience was over for that particular time. And I was pushed out of the immediate threat, to say it like that. So I think by then, due to the fact that I was outside my body during the entire process, my body needed to connect with the spirit. I know it's going to sound crazy mostly, but there had to be like a jerking effect where I needed to go back. And that only happened when they blocked the bed. So before that, there was no opening channel for me to re-enter the body.
Okay, isn't that interesting? Now, have you ever had before or after an out-of-body experience?
Not as people describe it, no. Not mainly, I will sit and meditate, for example, and then the imagine part of my brain would be so realistic, but it doesn't feel like I'm leaving my actual body. And the only way that I can compare it to is with this after the operation experience. I still feel connected to my body, as when I was lying on top of my body before I went back, I wasn't connected.
Okay. Now, you've also had other NDEs when you were a toddler, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. I drowned.
Okay. Do you want to give a thumbnails sketch, if you will, of those experiences? Would that be okay?
But unfortunately, I cannot remember any NDE experience. I just know that CPR was applied to me twice after each drowning. And ever since then, I had, let's say, a connection to the paranormal due to that, I'm assuming.
Do you remember at what age you found out about your other NDEs?
I was very young. I can remember I was extremely scared of water growing up, and I'm assuming it was the connection because of that. So taking a bath back then when I was 3 or 4, I was screaming. As adults probably explain to me of what happened, I think my physical and consciousness also reminded me of that.
Do you know how long your, if you will, passing lasted?
No, unfortunately not. No, I can't remember that information, but I knew it was quite some time.
All right, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to switch gears, I think, here a little bit. Are you able to currently, or at one time, you're able to see a white orb, as you were mentioning earlier, behind individuals just prior to their passing? Or do you want to expand on that? I know that you did mention something about that, but just if you wouldn't mind just going over that again.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's not an orb to say. It's more like a white cloud. It doesn't have a shape. Each and every one differs from human to animals. The saddest part about it is whenever I see it, I know that's the final. There's no intervention that can save anyone from it. So I normally don't see it to people. I think you need to make your affairs in order, something unexpected might happen. I normally keep it to myself. I only share it with close family relatives if I know that they won't be able to reach out to that person or the person's family members. I don't want to intervene, if I can mention it like that.
Did you have this ability since you were young, or did this ability occur after your last NDE?
Since I was 5, I saw the white death, if I can call it that. It happened with my uncle, where I saw the white light, and back then, it was the first experience I had, and I didn't know what it mean. Since from a very young age, my parents knew that I could see a different parallel. And I saw that, something is going to happen with Uncle Joe, for example. everyone in the first experience when I said that, listen, something is going to happen to Uncle Joe, everyone thought I was a bit losing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then surely a week later, he passed away. And everyone was like, okay, this is, let's pay attention. And then my grandmother, about 8 months later, I also saw a white shadow following her. And I'm like, oh, your granny is not going to live much longer. And my mom said, but how do you mean? I'm like, I saw the same white thing that I saw behind Uncle Joe. And then surely enough, a week later, she also passed away. And that happened to so many people that I've come across my entire life. It's still happening today, even animals, pets.
Do you think it was their spirit guide or an angel?
In all honesty, I don't know what it is. Everyone thinks that death is so grim and bad, but it's actually such a beautiful thing. And I think that one thing, in a sense, is a protection to soften the death process.
Do you think that the white mist is related to the white light of the orb?
Yes.
Now, after your 2007 NDE, did you gain the ability to see spirits, these spirits that bring you messages or warnings? Did that happen after that last incident?
Yes, it happens to anyone. So if I go to a store,
wow,
and this is actually quite funny, I will see the mist following them.
Oh
Tell my
my.
husband, that person, I saw the white. And he's like, okay, did you see it behind? I'm like, no, you're safe. But like I said, I normally don't say it.
So the other, do you call it a gift, ability?
I see the person in a more relaxed environment. And then I can see, for example, if it was a traumatic passing, if they allow me to see it.
The messages that you get from spirit, are they only for people that you yourself know?
I tend to ignore it as far as I can, but sometimes they try to pull my attention that I do not have another option than to say what I need to say. Yeah, sometimes they do come with a bang. It's not as lovely as people make it. They don't romance it. It's normally very straightforward, and I give it as straightforward. I don't want to sugarcoat it because I believe there's a reason why they give it to me like it is.
Well, Willa, do you wish at this point to impart a takeaway message for the listener?
Sure. My message would be live life. Everything is as it should be. And don't be afraid of death. Death is beautiful. It's not connected to pain or fear as we think it is. But the moment when your time is there, embrace it. Don't be scared. It's a transition that we all will have to make at the end of the day. I, for one, am not afraid to die. I can't wait to go back to that.
Go back to your home.
Yes, to that orb.
Yeah, okay. Well, in closing, I just want to say thank you again, Willa, and thank you for the telling of your message that you told. I'm sure that it's going to resonate with a lot of their listeners. So thank you again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Kelly Jo, for hosting me and talking to me, and to all the listeners listening.
You're quite welcome. Thanks very much. Take care.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. I would like to keep this cast a commercial-free zone. In light of that, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channels. All my orb videos are available by using the handle @SpiritOrbSightings, or visit my new channel with the handle @Orbicle Times Podcast. If you've already subscribed, many thanks. For blogs, episodes, show notes, bios, images, and video, please visit www.orbicletimes.com. If you enjoyed an episode, then please give a like or a share on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, or whatever podcatcher you happen to use. If you've already done so, much appreciated. Thank you for taking your time to visit these Orbicle Times. Orbicle Times Podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kelly Jo, at Studio Spare Room.